Hello, this is Evan Reisner bringing you a game of Day of the Dead. I recommend you take a look at the card images below this video just to familiarize yourself with some of the things you'll be seeing. In this game, I'll be located in the top corner of your screen, using the blue counters to keep track of my score, and my friend Matt is in the bottom portion, using the red counters. Now, Matt started the game with priority, and his first fighter is a card called Grief. It has 6 power, and its effect makes me lose 2 victory points. It's not going to do a lot right now since we're both starting at 0, but as the game goes on, it could really hurt my score. So I had decided to unearth my initial fighter and get a really high power one in Paranoid. Hopefully it'll give me a slight lead on Matt and prevent Grief from ruining my day. Unfortunately, Paranoid has a drawback when it's fighting. It gets -1 for every fight so far this turn. So as we add cards to the line, there'll be more fights, and it'll get weaker and weaker. I'm probably going to have to replace it very soon, just so that the drawback doesn't end up hurting me even more. My next card play is a card called Survival, which gets a bonus for every 5 power or fewer card your opponent has. Unfortunately for me, Matt doesn't have any of those cards, so I end up losing this fight, and I'm probably going to have to replace it soon. I end up turning Survival into my spirit so that I can unearth Paranoid with a card that I feel relatively comfortable with. Unfortunately, I don't really see any that I like that much, so I end up replacing it with the card called White that gets a substantial bonus as long as you have a Fallen on Earth card. Sure, it'll beat Grief here, but I'm not going to be gaining very many points. I actually end up going down in score and end up being at 8 for the turn to Matt's 11. And the card that Matt used to beat Survival is called Resist. It gets a really large power bonus if its owner has the least victory points. So my new strategy is going to be come as close to Matt's score as possible without going over, just so that Resist doesn't do as much and Grief doesn't hurt me too badly. I pick Unearth as my spirit and get rid of Survival, and my new card for the turn is a card called Bone, which gets a bonus for every Fallen card you have in play. Matt's new card is another huge card called Moody, which has a drawback when fighting because at the end of the turn your opponent can force you to unearth it. So if I lose this fight, which I probably will, at least I can replace that card. The card I ended up picking to get rid of Survival for is called Twin, which copies the effect of your next fighter in line. Unfortunately for me, getting the +1 bonus from Bone's effect, it isn't enough to beat Moody, but at least I get Matt to replace it with a slightly smaller card that doesn't really have a combat-oriented ability, and hopefully I can beat later on. Now, since Matt still is going to be gaining a decent number of points, I end up unearthing White and getting Moody. On the off chance that Matt keeps it going, I can potentially just get ahead on him. But unluckily for me, he ends up switching his spirit effects, getting power up, and tying Moody. So his card is going to stay face up, and he does decide to force me to replace Moody with the new card, which probably won't give me as many points. I end up picking Forget, which is kind of lucky because it's 7 points, and it has an effect that makes you sort of get rid of the effect of one of your cards after it in line. Since it's right at the start of that line, there aren't any cards after it, and the drawback really won't impact me much. As long as he doesn't have a power-up constantly going on Grief, I can potentially beat it and be gaining a decent number of points. As the scores stand now, Matt's ahead of me. He's got 24 to my 19. We're about one card shy of one another, so if I can beat the Grief, it might be the edge I need to catch up. I also decide to play as my new card called Greed, which will gain me victory points for every 10 that I have. And I was thinking, if I have Twin at the front of the line copying Greed, then I'll get the ability a couple of times each turn and potentially continue to push my score, maybe even to a point where I just don't care about Resist or about Grief. And Matt's new card is a card called Prize, which will give him a power bonus if he's ahead in points. It's not worth a lot of victory points since it's a 2-power card, but it works nicely with Resist because Resist can push him to make sure that he's ahead, and then Prize can keep the lead with its ability. And unfortunately for me, that card that Matt's using right now is called Spook, which at 3 power isn't going to win many fights, but it lets him unearth any card on the field, even mine. So he's getting rid of my Bone card to try and minimize the point gain I have. And pretty much any card he picks will lose, because even with the power-up bonus, Bone's ability already triggered and gives the bonus to the new card he picked. He's going to lose this fight, but he can turn Spook into a spirit and just keep Spook at the front of the line if he so chooses, and just constantly get rid of any problem cards he sees. The card he chose for me is a card called Gray. It's kind of like the power-up version of White. It gets a power bonus if you have a fallen power-up card. And luckily this turn goes pretty well for me, and he really only gets the win with Prize and gains 2 victory points. I end up gaining a total of 15 and managed to pull ahead of him. My score is 33 to his 26. Now, I, for some reason or another, managed to get another twin, and I'm kind of hoping that I can continue this train of Greed, since he didn't bother to really replace Greed last turn. Twin will copy Twin, which in turn copies Greed, and I'm going to be gaining points here. I do end up losing the fight because he's got Grief with the power-up out, but I did gain a substantial amount of points anyway. Unfortunately, since Matt has priority on me, he gets to Spook before I get to copy Greed another time. And basically ruin my plan. He does leave me with a really nice card though. It's called Control, and it lets me pick any card in play, and that card loses its effect until the end of turn. I usually like to aggressively push that card to the front of my line, because the fact that I can just blank any card like Spook, for instance, which would give me a lot of trouble, is pretty nice. I decide to blank his new card, which is called Knowledge. It draws him a card. It's It's not a huge deal for me because I was going to win the fights that I needed to there anyway, but just in case one of his cards cares about any cards in hand or any new effects, I just don't want him having that extra bonus. Nice for me. It's going to be Forget versus Prize in the end, and Prize is just not going to get very many bonuses because since Matt's currently behind, it's just a flimsy 2-power card. That's why he ends up switching out Knowledge, making it his new spirit so he can just unearth Prize, get rid of this terrible matchup, and actually turn it into a winnable one, because Anger's just going to have 8 power to Forget's 7, and Anger just crushes Forget. Matt scored an awful lot of points this turn, and actually ended up catching up to me. I'm currently 1 point ahead of him, which would have been really nice if he still had Prize out, but Resist still exists, and that's going to be a problem for me. Now, for the final turn, I decided to pick Power Up as my Spirit effect, because there are a lot of close matchups on the board, and the +2 to my power might be enough to just outright win a lot of them. Matt ended up picking Unearth, and this seemed like a great decision. He got rid of Knowledge, which would have lost to Control, and replaced it with Oath, which just flat out beats it. I feel like my choice for blanking a card with Control was just wrong, because by picking Grief, I don't lose the 2 victory points, which seems kind of counterintuitive. Why would you be okay with losing 2 victory points? But it would be just enough to put me behind Matt and effectively eliminate Resist's effect. Fortunately, I also had this card Nightmare, which lets me copy the effect of any card in play, and I end up copying Spook's ability and use it on itself, getting rid of the problem that Spook might cause and replacing the lineup. Now, if I had picked Anger with Control instead of Grief, I would effectively win the fight against Grief, the fight against Paranoid, which is the card I chose to replace Spook with. Resist wouldn't have an ability, so Gray would beat it, and Forget would be 7 power to Anger's 3, and I would have cleared out all these guys. But as you can see, I'm going to end up losing Gray, and I'm also going to end up losing Forget. And with these 2 losses, that'll pretty much be game. Matt'll pull ahead of me in points and end up winning. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a little bit more about Day of the Dead. Take care.